everyone, let us discuss about forced labor. Forced labor occurs when people are forced to execute work or provide services against their will through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. It is further defined as work done forcibly and under threat of punishment. An example of this is a parent having a debt of a certain family, but due to the fact that a parent died, the child must take over the responsibility just to pay the debt. Now let's move on the importance of addressing forced labor. So, in economic circumstances can cause people to trade away their freedom, and labor exploitation can take numerous forms. But forced labor is something very different. It occurs when the state or persons with the will and authority to threaten workers with severe deprivation of exact labor or services. Debt bondage, trafficking, and other kinds of modern slavery are all examples of forced labor. And one of the people who are prone to this are women or girls, coerced into prostitution, migrants imprisoned in debt bondage, and sweatshops or agricultural laborers, kept there by plainly unlawful measures and paid little or nothing, are the most vulnerable victims. This is why, according to available data, the number of people subjected to forced labor is not decreasing and may even be increasing. Hence, it is crucial to abolish forced labor due to the fact that it might drastically impact the subject's physical and psychological conditions, which results in mental strain or suffering.
The impact of forced labor on workers. Physical and psychological harm. Workers in Malaysia create chocolates, cookies, and other delights on a 2-acre confectionery industrial complex. According to some of the firm, 60 Nepali migrant workers behind the lovely packaging and candid contents is a work environment that involves physical harassment to push workers to manufacture sweets. Suicidal ideation is also one of the psychological harm wherein victims of forced labor often do self-harm and self-blame. Second is economic exploitation and debt bondage. An additional instance of exploitation is the agricultural sector within the United States, wherein employers keep undocumented immigrants along with people with visas isolated and in debt.
Brief overview of forced labor. First, people who are compelled to work are subjected to a variety of abusive methods known as forced labor, also known as unfree labor. In the most extreme form of precarious employment is referred to as hyper-precarity, being forced to work against your will. So for example, as a student, we also have to find a part-time job because of poverty, even though this situation is again and difficult for us. Second, agriculture, for example, has a low margin of profit as well as substantial fixed expenses. It can be hard to relocate output, and as a consequence, employers are under pressure to get more value out of labor by reducing wage, shifting from hourly pay to performance pay, subcontracting work, and recruiting migrant workers who are less likely to publicly express concerns about their working conditions. Second, literature review. Prevalence of forced labor worldwide. Forced labor in the agriculture industry, Allen 2012. Gender disparity in land ownership and security of tenure over land has been observed to lead to poverty, reliance, and risk of violence. Example is gender role in manifested in social rights and entitlement in a form which denies women equal economic and political empowerment, and in particular, women's right to own land. Second, forced labor in the manufacturing industry, CARA 2016. Laborers can labor 10 to 12 hours per day for 7 days a week with little no to rest. Perpetrators generally mislead to company providing workers with misleading information about working conditions, benefits, and wages. If employees attempt to leave, they may face deportation, violence, or danger to their family. For example, construction workers and domestic laborers are victims of death bondage and face severe wage explanation and experience serious health and safety problems resulting from inhumane work and living conditions.
Labor on workers. According to Allen 2012, there is impact of forced labor and physical and psychological. Example to that is when workers in Malaysia create chocolates, cookies, and other delights on a 2-acre confectionery industrial complex. According to some of the firm's 60 Nepal migrant workers, behind the lovely packaging and candid contents is a work environment that involves physical harassment to push workers to manufacture sweets. Suicidal ideation is one of the psychological harm who are victims of forced labor, which is associated with self-harm and or self-blame. There is also an impact of forced labor in economics, which is the economic exploitation and debt bondage. An additional instance of exploitation is the agricultural sector within the United States, where employers keep undocumented immigrants along with people with visas isolated and in debt. For undocumented immigrants face the obvious issue of being illegally present, which means that the risk of being arrested, imprisoned, and deported is very real. Employers are cognizant of this and take benefit from it by threatening illegally employed individuals with deportation. Controversy exacerbates the situation since debtors are unable to keep or verify documents of loan payment received, and in the majority of cases, no written agreement exists in the very beginning. Assault and threats of violence, as well as more subtle methods, such as exclusion from the future job opportunities, can be used to reinforce the connection. In the worst case scenario, children may be bonded off from their families, or they may inherit their parents' debts.
So therefore, we need to take action to increase the awareness against forced labor. First and foremost, we need to collaborate with the authorities, international organizations, businesses, and other individuals whose goal is to stop and eliminate forced labor, and for us to develop and implement effective policies, legislation, and regulations. Yes, it is critical to take actions about the seriousness and consequences of forced labor, since there are factors that we need to consider. One of those factors is that individuals don't have a choice or don't have any options to where they will feel their worth as a worker because of the lack of access to education and of poverty. Furthermore, we must assist and protect the victims of forced labor through providing them with access to justice, medical services, and other resources that they require to recuperate and establish their lives, as well as supporting organizations that provide assistance and encouragement to survivors of forced labor, along with those who are at risk of being exploited.
So we have the roles of individuals, government, and businesses in combating forced labor. Let's consider a situation where a company has a discriminatory policy that prohibits individuals from certain racial or ethnic backgrounds from being promoted to managerial position. By addressing workplace discrimination, this policy can challenge and change, allowing individuals from all racial or ethnic backgrounds to have equal opportunities for advancement within the company. This example highlights the importance of recognizing and rectifying discriminatory practices to create a fair, exclusive works for our environment and to all individuals. So the next is government. The Global Slavery Index has been evaluating government's effort to combat the modern slavery for 3 years, while also considering estimate of its prevalence and vulnerability. It assesses the activities undertaken by the government to address this issue and provide a valuable insight into the global fight against the modern slavery. We have the specific example. As part of the Global Slavery Index assessment, a specific example could involve evaluating a government's implementation of legislation and policies aimed to preventing human trafficking, prosecuting traffickers, and supporting victims. This assessment would consider the effectiveness of government action in combating modern slavery and provide recommendations for improvement if needed. So we have the last one, the business. So business have a significant role in eradicating forced labor. They can achieve this by ensuring constant access to employees' record, such as passport and identifications card. Implementing a clear and transparent company policy agent forced labor and human trafficking. Extending the policy to all participating businesses in the supply chain and closely monitoring labor agencies that operate across borders. Additionally, business with blacklist agencies knows to withhold workers' document preventing them from freely leaving. So we have the specific example. So let's consider a multinational clothing corporation that wants to combat forced labor in its supply chain. So as part of its effort, the company implements a policy requiring all suppliers to provide regular updates on the passports and identifications card on their employees. The company sets up a centralized database accessible to authorized personnel, ensuring instant accessibility to this record by actively monitoring and verifying workers' documents. The corporation can detect and address any potential cases of forced labor, promoting transparency and accountability within its supply chain.
Forced labor is a serious and pervasive problem that affects millions of people around the world. It is a violation of human rights and is unacceptable that people are forced to work against their will, often in deplorable conditions for little or no pay. The need for increased awareness and action against forced labor is urgent. To address this issue, we must support and protect victims of forced labor by providing them with access to justice, healthcare, and other resources they need to recover and rebuild their lives. This includes supporting organizations that provide services and supports to survivors of forced labor and those who are at risk of being exploited.